Hey, what's happening, everybody? LethalFrag here, back for another episode of Cooking with Frag. Big thanks to Vila for suggesting mac and cheese. Believe it or not, before this episode, I had never made a mac and cheese from scratch, so I got to learn a new recipe and learn how to make a cheese sauce, which is pretty cool. How I avoided making mac and cheese from scratch in 7 years in kitchens, I have no idea, but here we are. So you'll notice on the counter here, I have all my mise en place set up, and I want this to be a focus of this episode, talking about what mise en place is and how it's very important to cooking. We've got all of the ingredients that we need for our recipe set up right on the counter here. This is the best thing you can do to improve your cooking time and minimize mistakes. For example, if you don't get your milk ahead of time, then you have to run to the fridge and find a measuring cup and then pour it into the measuring cup, and by then, maybe you've burned something. So go through your recipe and figure out everything that you need, get it ready to go before you start. In addition to saving you time, minimizing mistakes, this also helps with cleanup. You've already gotten everything out, you've used your cutting board, you can already have pre-washed that before you even start. Another thing I want to talk about with recipes, it's very important to read them fully. If you have anything that takes a long time, like boiling water, you want to get that on right away before you start anything else. So especially the case in boiling water, it's not going to go anywhere, so the quicker you can have it at a boil, the better. If you wait to do this till the very end, you're going to have a stale cheese sauce, which isn't a big deal, but you'll end up waiting 20 minutes for your water to boil and noodles to cook when you could have had that going at the same time. All right, so to make a basic cheese sauce, what we're going to do is we're going to melt some butter. We're going to add shallots, when you can use onion as well. Then we're going to add some flour to make a little mini roux. This will be the thickener for our cheese sauce. Then we're going to add the milk. We're going to take it off the heat, add the cheese, let that melt in, and then cook it back up. So I already have my water on the stove here. The only thing I added to this water was salt. Salt raises the boiling temperature of water by a few degrees. This helps you achieve a nice rolling boil consistently. So now we have our water boiling. The first thing I'm going to do here is turn this burner on pretty low. Please don't explode on me. There we go. And we're going to start melting this butter down. Since we already have our water at a rolling boil, we're going to take our macaroni noodles and dump them in. That was not a good rip. All right, lost a few. I'm actually going to put this on the lower burner here because it has more of a heat source to keep the water hotter. The hotter your water is when you're boiling noodles, the better. Also, pro tip, if you're starting to boil water, always put a lid on it. It'll make it boil about twice as fast. We're going to add our macaroni. And we're just going to give this a quick stir. Stir your pasta every minute and a half, 2 minutes to avoid clumping. At the start, not such a big deal. My water could have been hotter, but it will be okay. This butter is going to take a minute to melt down. This is 4 tablespoons of butter. What we're going to do is use half of this for the breadcrumbs, or about half, maybe even a third. Then we're going to use the rest to make our roux. You can use anything for breadcrumbs. We had panko breadcrumbs left over, so that's what I'm using. You can also use crushed up crackers. You can blend up stale bread. Lots of different ways to make breadcrumbs. By adding a little bit of butter to the breadcrumbs, it will make them taste better. In hindsight, I could have cut this butter up into cubes to make it melt faster, but here we are. Want to do this on a relatively low heat so that we don't burn the solids of the butter before adding the flour. Moving it around does make it melt a little bit faster too. But all good things take time. Cutting it into cubes would have made this go about twice as fast, but hindsight's always 20/20. Let's get a little flip. Stir our noodles. You can really follow whatever the package says on pasta is usually pretty good. What does this one say? I usually just taste my pasta. Yeah, okay. 6 minutes, they say. Probably going to be more like 7 since my water wasn't so hot. The hotter your water is, the less clumping you can have. People also like to add oil to the water to prevent clumping. I find this more important if you're going to cool the pasta afterwards. For adding it directly to a sauce ain't as big of a deal. All right, there we go. Nice melty butter. So as you can tell, this is not a particularly healthy recipe, but everything in moderation. Butter's very good. Cheese is very good. Noodles are good too. All right, so we got this little over halfway melted. I'm just going to pull this to the side and take some butter out, Put it over the breadcrumbs, then we'll stir them up a bit. You may think this will make them soggy, but it won't once they crisp up in the oven. That should be good. Let's give them a little stir. Doesn't have to be perfectly distributed throughout, but those little clumps of buttery breadcrumb will make for a very nice texture. Also, in hindsight, I could have got a bigger bowl for this. But you know what? That's okay. Talked about this on the broadcast last night, but mistakes happen all the time when you're cooking, and a lot of people refuse to cook because they feel like they're going to mess stuff up. And I'll tell you right now, you're going to mess stuff up, but even great cooks mess stuff up all the time. There's always ways to improve your recipes or be more efficient. Just take some practice. All right, so we got this nice butter here. I'm going to go ahead and add my shallots. Once again, onion is perfectly fine to use here too. I just had a leftover shallot I wanted to use. If you don't know what a shallot is, it's kind of a mix between garlic and onion is the best way to describe it. All right, so we're not worried about cooking these down because we're going to have plenty of time with the flour in there. We're going to add our flour in, kind of want to shake it around, try to avoid any major clumping. But this is making a basic roux, which is just butter and flour, which is a really classic thickening ingredient. Now, the important part here is that we end up cooking the flour down. If you just add flour to something, it ends up being very grainy. So the goal here is to make it cook off and become not grainy. Need to be conscious of your heat here because you do have the milk solids from the butter in the whole butter. So if you go too high on the temperature, it will burn. However, getting a little bit of brown on your roux is a way to add flavor. There's many different layers of when you make just a roux. There's blonde roux, brown roux, and even black roux in a lot of applications. Black roux is more used for like Creole cooking and stuff like that. But it's a really nice depth of flavor, but you're essentially burning the flour. So you can see in this pan the way that it's bubbling, that is the flour doing its magic with the butter. We're just going to keep this stirring until it gets a little bit browner. Then we'll add our milk. If you're adding a roux to a liquid, if you've pre-made your roux, which we've done in previous episodes, it's always best if you add a hot roux to a cold liquid or a cold roux to a hot liquid. So if you need to make a roux to thicken something, you make it beforehand and then add it to your hot liquid. In this case, we're making a hot roux, and we have cold milk on the counter here. So we'll be adding cold milk to the hot roux, and we'll make it... I can try switching channels. It looks fine, though. All right, let me fix this audio thing real quick. Just got to turn this down a smidge. Let's go for a different channel. Well, I hope that alleviates the audio issue. On occasion, there can be interference. All right, so you can see that our roux, it's more of a liquid roux. Roux is generally a bit thicker than this, but we're using more butter than usual because mac and cheese. Starting to brown up a little bit. So give that about another minute and a half, 2 minutes, and we're ready to add our milk. You can also taste the roux to see if it still tastes grainy, but the more practice with making roux, you'll just know by looking at it. All right. Macaroni is about a minute and a half, 2 minutes out. I don't know what it is. I love tasting pasta. I always have. A lot of people like to do it by timer. I love to do it by taste. Let's give this a little taste. Still tastes pretty grainy. So you notice I'm moving this pan around a lot, and that's try to avoid any burning of the milk solids. I think at this point we're pretty safe. The flour is pretty incorporated into the butter, so burning should be less of an issue. Is it still happening?
Yeah, they said that it's cutting off parts of the audio, so maybe just move it a little closer to your...
All right, we'll give that a go then. Sorry for the audio issues. There's always something. As I always say, part of working with technology is technical difficulties. It's never fun, but we are very blessed to have the technology that we do to be doing segments like this and live streaming and everything else. All right, macaroni is pretty darn close. Now you'll see on the edges here, we're starting to get a little bit of brown coloration. That's good. So again, this roux is a little bit wet, which is going to be fine for this purpose, but it's equal parts by weight flour and butter to make a traditional roux, which will come out ending up looking kind of like a paste at the end of the day. Little pro, if you're having a boil over, you can blow on them. They will return quickly, but blowing on them will remove the upper layer of bubbles. Alright, so this did not time out the way that I thought it was going to, so we're going to have to shock the noodles. Every time you hear the term shock, that means running cold water or dipping something in ice to stop it from cooking more. If I just took this pasta off the stove and did not shock it, it would end up continuing to cook and be overdone. Oh man, that looks so good. Okay, that is much less grainy now, so I'm going to end up adding about 2/3 of the milk here. Once again, we're adding a cold liquid to the hot roux. Just give this a little bit, and it'll kind of come together and thicken up. You can always add more liquid to thin something out, but this will take about 5 minutes or so. And so you make a basic thickened sauce. Alright, so we're going to turn off our noodles now since they're done and run these over to the colander. Always pour away from yourself when pouring hot water. It will splash up, and believe it or not, steam burns are a pretty big thing. Steam burns really suck. If you've ever worked with an industrial steamer and got a burn from that, it is very unpleasant. Same thing can happen at home. Steam is extremely hot. So we're just running some cold water over these noodles. Give them a little toss. Just trying to cool them down enough so they don't carry over cook into being mush. And then we'll just let the water drain off while everything else cooks. Since we're adding this to a cheese sauce, adding oil to the noodles is a non-issue. If you're going to store noodles overnight, you want to toss them lightly in oil so they don't clump together. But since we're doing this application, it's not a problem. So what we want to have happen here is get some bubbles rolling in the milk. That'll start breaking down the roux even more and start thickening the sauce. Okay, while we're doing this, we can give our counter area a little clean. It's always good to clean as you go. Cleaning as you go is like the best skill to have when you're cooking. 100%. No, I'm picking up breathing. Okay, cool. Whoopsie daisy, little spill there. Well, we definitely have time for some questions or anything if anybody has some, because we got to wait for this to thicken up before we add our cheese. Really excited about mac and cheese. I don't eat mac and cheese very often. When I was a kid, I really didn't like Kraft mac and cheese, and that's probably why I never really made mac and cheese myself. I know it's a whole different beast, but me and cheese have not always been friends. I like cheese in moderation. Mac and cheese is a little cheesy for me, but it is darn tasty. There's no question about it. All right, we're going to crank this until we get bubbles, then we'll turn it down. Though a nice cheese sauce is a good thing to know how to make. The roux application that we just did is used for a wide variety of sauces and bases. So knowing the basics of making a roux and browning a roux is definitely an integral part of a lot of cooking techniques. All right, we got bubbles now. Gonna wait for a few more bubbles. Want some bubbles in the center here before we turn it down. We'll just gently roll the heat back a bit. That is exactly what we're looking for right here. Not a boil, but a nice simmer. You can already see the liquid starting to thicken up a bit as you drag the spoon through. If it wasn't thickened at all, you wouldn't see any of the bottom of the pan here. But we see some. Oh yeah, there it goes. To fully cook out a roux, it takes 10 minutes. Since we cooked the roux so heavily before, it'll probably be closer to 5. But once again, this is something we're going to take a spoon and taste. If it tastes really floury and grainy, we'll know it's not done. Oh, I know by looking at it, it's not done yet. You'll also notice that at the start of making this roux, there was a lot more yellow stuff on the top, when that's the butter fats. It's starting to incorporate into the sauce via the flour now, so there's a lot less yellow stuff on top of the sauce. And it's just getting thicker and thicker and thicker. I reserved a little bit of milk here because you can always add more liquid in, but you cannot take liquid out. Oh yeah. Let me tell you, since making lifestyle changes and eating so healthy, stuff like this becomes a real treat. Just wonderful. And of course, the cheese will also thicken up our sauce quite a bit. Okay, that sauce tastes really smooth, so I think we're ready to add our cheese. What you have to do here is take your mixture off the heat. If you leave it on the heat, the cheese will become like really clumpy. So we got a little bit of Parmesan on top here and about 2 cups of sharp cheddar. Get that incorporated into the sauce, and then we're going to let this sit for a minute so the cheese melts naturally before we stir it. So we're going to get it broken up as much as we can, and then we're going to let the heat of the liquid do its work and start melting down the cheese. So I want to talk about a little secret ingredient here. I learned this from Chef Dankard, one of my culinary instructors, and that guy was a boss. He was my favorite teacher. Pretty cool dude. And anytime you make something that has a lot of milk or cream in it, you add a little bit of hot sauce. You can use Tabasco or chili paste or something. You will not taste this in the sauce. This will not be a spicy mac and cheese. But a little bit of hot sauce into a cream-based sauce or soup or anything else gives this really nice depth of flavor. Once again, it will not taste spicy, but it adds the missing part that's not cream. Our cheese sauce is definitely starting to come together here. You can see our cheese melted nice and even off the heat. So we're just going to keep stirring this until everything's melted, and then we're going to heat it up just a little bit. See, looking at this, I'm glad I did not add the full 3 cups of milk. We went about 2.5 cups instead. Also, this will thicken up quite a bit as it cools down, and will also thicken up quite a bit in the baking process. There's a couple leftover chunks of cheese we're going to have to get out of there via heating this up. All right, so our cheese sauce incorporated properly. You can tell it's got nice consistent color. I'm going to turn this back on and get it bubbling just a little bit to get all those bigger cheese chunks out of there. Hope everybody's following along so far. It's a very easy recipe to execute and very tasty. If you need to cook a meal for somebody, this will undoubtedly be good. Also with this recipe, I kept it very simple, as I like to do with Cooking with Frag recipes. This is definitely open to interpretation. You can do all sorts of different stuff with this base cheese sauce. I mean, you can add bacon or prosciutto or whatever you want to add. People love the cheese cam. It's beautiful. So I got this troublesome chunk right here, but it'll get there one way or another. Cheese sauce is a pretty good viscosity. How you test viscosity in a pan is drag your spoon through, and how long it takes the liquid to reincorporate back into the pan. You can tell by that little line I'm making there. That's how you tell the viscosity of your sauce. You do the same thing when you're making just a base roux or all sorts of other stuff. It's a good barometer for where you're at. Okay, let's make sure our noodles have not clumped together. They have not. They're a little bit wet though. Let's tap those out. All right, I'm going to be cooking this in a round casserole dish. You can do it in a long casserole dish, whatever else you want. A little bit of noodles here just to make sure we have a good consistency. Once again, you can always add more in, but you can never really take it out in that situation. Okay. Perfect. All the little cheese clumps have disappeared, so we now have a working cheese sauce, which we're going to let cool down for a minute, and then we're going to pour it over, add our breadcrumbs, and then into the oven. I'm actually going to turn this on to broil, because I don't think we're going to have the 15 minutes to bake this. Okay, so normally you bake this on 350 for about 10 minutes. Beware, the longer you bake your mac and cheese, the thicker the cheese sauce will become. So if you overbake it, you could end up with a very dry mac and cheese. So if you intend on baking it for a long time and that's how you like it, try to use more sauce than you think you need to. All right, now we're going to pour this cheese sauce over the mac. Oh, baby. And then we're going to stir gently just to get it incorporated. I can already see it's very liquidy, so we're going to add more noodles. In hindsight, it may have been a good idea to withhold a little bit of sauce too, but we're going to have just the right amount of noodles. This recipe was tested beforehand. But as always, safety first. So you just want to stir it to make sure there's sauce on all the noodles. And that's the big part. Nobody wants dry mac and cheese. Yeah, that's a really good consistency. Nice and cheesy. And hell, you could eat it just like this, but I think baking it adds, with the breadcrumb, adds just that little bit of extra flavor. Okay, I got a few dry pieces over here. Scrape out the pan. Can't be wasting that cheese. Once again, if you like yours heavier cheese sauce or lighter cheese sauce, you can adjust the ratios accordingly. Just add a little bit at a time and don't overcommit yourself to one way or another. Let's go back over here. Now we're going to take our breadcrumbs that are lightly buttered. Get those pressed into the top. More breadcrumbs better, in my opinion. All right. Now we're going to toss this into the oven, and then I'll answer a few questions while it's cooking, which won't take too long. All right. Lightly buttered, yeah, definitely lightly buttered. Yeah, the breadcrumbs do add a nice consistency. If you just have noodles and cheese, it's kind of not soupy, but it's missing something. This is the only kitchen in the house sample. That'd be absolute madness if we had another kitchen. Why gas over electric? Gas is just better in most cases. Electric's fine. You can do just about anything on electric, but gas provides a very consistent temperature that you have extreme control over, where electric is not so much. Can you use different kinds of cheeses? Absolutely. You can use any kind of cheese that you want in mac and cheese. Some cheeses are better for melting than others. Fontina is like one of the best melting cheeses, though it is expensive. Let's check this real quick. Oh my goodness, we're already done.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, definitely more time to answer questions here, but I want to get this off so we can take a look at it. Here. So that's really easy mac and cheese. I just broiled that. Ideally, you'd bake it for about 10 minutes at 350 to get that brown on the top. But we broiled it in this case, which is a quick way to do it if you're low on time and you need to fake it. Just throw it under the broiler real quick. Nice and easy. So if you guys have any cooking questions to end out the show, I'll be more than happy to answer here. Let me grab a spoon and get some of this in a bowl too. Yeah, that'll do. Nice and easy, cheesy mac. It's beautiful. It's a good thing to eat with mac and cheese. I like roasted vegetables myself. I always feel like you eat something really fatty and cream-based. You want something light to get that. Citrus is also very good. Garlic bread, yeah. But something to cut the fat. It's always nice. That came out pretty darn good. I would say for next time that I should have withheld some of the noodles. If we were going to bake it for 10 minutes, this would have came out a little bit dry. So I would have liked a little more liquid on the noodles, but the overall flavor profile is very good. Oh, also another thing, instead of just using whole milk, you can also use cream in your mac and cheese. But if you're going to use cream in your mac and cheese, beware that you're probably going to have to add some pasta water or something else to thin out the water or the sauce a little bit. The more fat content that's in the cream or milk that you use, the thicker your sauce will end up being at the end. How would you add pancetta? Great question. Actually, Panny Raid Swag, if you're going to do pancetta, you might even forego the butter. Pancetta is very fatty, so what you do is take the saute pan, render the pancetta to get all the fat off of it, and then add the flour to the pancetta fat, and use that as your base for the mac and cheese. It'll be very salty, but very good. How do you keep the cheese sauce from getting oily? Well, you don't, really, because you're adding fat and flour into cream. A higher grade cheese, a drier cheese, will have less oil in it, too. So if you're using softer cheeses, they'll often have more oil. But at the end of the day, your mac and cheese sauce can be very fatty and therefore probably pretty oily. A good thing to do to avoid oil separation is cook on as low a heat as possible as you can to bring it up gently. If you just blast the burner, you're going to end up getting a lot of oil pushing up to the top. So lower temperature, you can use a firmer cheese, and just keep an eye on it. Yes, I prefer gas over induction, absolutely. I think gas, I worked in kitchens for so long that gas is what I'm most comfortable with. How much pancetta would be enough for that? That's a good question. Probably about half a pound or half a tube if you buy it in the tube. Are there better types of pastas for the roux de court? I think fine bow tie works very well. Penne can also work very well for mac and cheese. If you're going to do penne, though, you need to add more sauce because it fills up the middle of the penne as well. How many beard hairs made into the mac and cheese? 0. Same thing with the bacon. You'd render the bacon and then use the fat as your roux if you want a saltier application. If you wash the noodles, do you lose nutrients? Nah. Honestly, pasta has very little nutrients in it. It's really just a pure carbohydrate. Yeah, you did. Is it okay to add hot dogs and mac and cheese? Absolutely. Whatever tastes good to you is what you should cook. There's nothing wrong with a little weenie mac. All right, guys. Well, I don't know what we're doing for next Cooking with Frag, but it is up to the Patreons. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the Patreon and making this content possible. Thank you all for your great questions. And thank you again to VLuft for the mac and cheese suggestion. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We'll be up to gaming content here in about 10 minutes. That's easy mac and cheese. Enjoy. That's all I got for today. Frag out.